Jane from Poppy Patchwork, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make an 8-inch block called Mosaic No. 5. I've drawn the block out in my quilt block notebook. I've designed this quilt block notebook which I use when I'm planning out the blocks that I'm going to do videos for, and you may find it useful. You can buy it from Amazon, and if you scan this code using your phone, it'll take you straight to the Amazon page for it. Now, let's get quilting. For this block, you're going to need, in background fabric, one 5 1/4 inch square and two 3-inch squares. In fabric A, you're going to need 4 2.5 inch squares. In fabric B, you're going to need 4 2 by 7 inch strips, and in fabric C, you're going to need 1 4.5 inch square. So we're going to start by making the corner square piece in the centre of the block, and for this we're going to need fabric C and fabric A. So I'm going to put the other fabrics to one side. Now for this we're going to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of the fabric A's, and you can see I've done that on all of these already. They're not quite right, so I'm just going to redraw them. So what we're now going to do is take these squares, and in two opposite corners I'm going to pin them right sides together with fabric C, and the drawn line needs to run from here to here, so that's the centre point on fabric C. I'm going to pop a pin to keep them in place. And you can do the opposite side at the same time. So again, the drawn line is running from here to here and here to here. I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew on top of the drawn line. So I'm now going to remove the pins, and then I'm going to cut 1/4 inch away from the drawn line towards this outer point here. Now I'm just going to finger press those out and just roller press that in place. And now I can place the other two pieces in the other corners. So again, I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine and draw on top of the drawn line. And once again, I'm going to remove the pins. And then I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch away from that sewn line. And this time I'm going to give it a proper press. So I'm going to set the seams and then press towards the small triangles. So I'm going to check the measurements, and this piece should now measure 4.5 inches, and between the point and the edge of the fabric should be 1/4 inch for your seam allowance. So it is a little bit wonky in places, but it's generally 4.5, so I'm not going to take anything off that at the moment. So the next thing we need to do is add the background fabric. So we're going to get the large square, which is 5 3/4 inches square, and we're going to cut this in half diagonally in both directions. So you can see I just turned my cutting mat rather than turning the fabric, because I didn't want to distort where the fabric was, and you get a better cut if you turn your mat rather than your fabric. So now we've got 4 triangles, and these need to go onto the edges here. So I'm going to line this up, and what you want is this point to be at this point here. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to fold it in half so that I get that centre point here. Give it a little bit of a finger press, and then right sides together I'm going to line that fold along this point here. I'm going to pop a pin in it. Now you do have to be careful because we are working with this exposed bias piece here, which can be quite stretchy. I'll pin that in place. I'm going to do the same on the opposite side. I'll just finger press to identify where that centre is there. Then right sides together. Match that folded piece up with the point on your block. now going to take that over to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm probably going to sew it this way up so that I can see where the seams cross, and I don't want to blunt my points here and here. So before I continue, I am going to give this a proper press. So I'm going to set the seams and then press towards the triangles. And now I'm just going to trim any little dog ears off the edge here. And now we're ready to put the other triangles in place. So I'm going to mark that center point again. And then I'm going to attach that right sides together. I'm going to pin in place and repeat on the other side. So I'm going to take that back over to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So again, I'm going to give that a proper press. I'm going to set the seams and press towards the triangles. So now I'm going to trim the edges of this. So once again, making sure that I've got a 1/4 inch between the point and the edge of the piece. To make sure you get that nice straight edge, try and place the line of the ruler at these 2 points when you do that. So once you've done that, when you place it in this orientation, the widest part should be 8.5 inches. And now we need to pin these strips onto each side. So laying them right sides together, I'm going to pin them in place. And these are cut a little bit longer so that you can trim them back down. And you can do opposite sides at the same time. So I'm going to take that to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew it this side up so that I can see the points here and here. And I'm going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam. once again, I'm going to give that a proper press. So I'm going to set the seams and press towards the strips. And now I'm going to cut the excess fabric. And remember, you need that 1/4 inch between this point and the edge of the fabric. And now we're going to place the other 2 pieces on. Now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking I've done this wrong. So I'm just going to go back and have a look at the pattern. Okay, I haven't done it wrong, but it just looks very different from how you would normally construct the block. So I'm going to carry on. This next piece does need to go here. I want to just find that center point by doing the finger press. And then I'm going to lay it right sides together with that finger press point here on this point. I'm going to pin it in place and I'm going to repeat on the other side. So I'm going to take that back over to the sewing machine, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, press it, and then we're going to trim it, and I think it will begin to make sense again. So I'm going to set the seams and press towards the strips. And now what we have to do is trim. So this is the orientation of the block, and this block is ultimately going to measure 8.5 inches. So we know that this to here was 8.5 inches. So I'm going to flip it onto the other side and I'm going to line the ruler up with the edge here, because we know that's 8.5 inches. I'm going to line the rest of the ruler up with the block to make it all centre, and then I'm going to trim these little pieces off here. Now flip that back over so we can see how that's now looking. So that is the orientation of the block, and we can see that we've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and we're going to be trimming it all the way around. So that's the orientation of the block. 8.5 inches here and here. Now we just need to put these corner pieces on. And these are in background fabric. And we've got 2 squares. We need to cut these squares in half. So you're going to take your background fabrics, which measure 3 inches square, and we're going to cut these in half once across the diagonal. And these can now be pinned to the corners. Again, remember that you've exposed that bias, so it is a little bit stretchy. You can pop these in place with a pin. You can do all 4 sides at the same time. So I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to give this a good press. I'm going to set the seams and press towards the triangle. And so now we are able to trim. I've just got my larger ruler and we want to trim these to 8.5. We want to trim the block to 8.5. So half of 8.5 is 4.25. So you need to line the 4.25 ruler line along the points, and then also make sure that when you're trimming you've got 1/4 inch either side here. I'm going to start with a different side. So congratulations, you have made the 8-inch Mosaic No. 5 block. At this stage it should measure 8.5 inches, and when it's sewn into the quilt it'll measure 8 inches. I hope you've enjoyed these videos, and thank you very much for all your support by downloading my patterns and buying my books. Bye for now and happy quilting!